Welcome back to Raul Effect. If you're looking for honest insights into avoidant attachment, emotional manipulation, and relationship psychology, you're in the right place. Stay with me until the end because today's discussion could completely change the way you recognize the red flags that should never be ignored. What if the biggest warning sign isn't that an avoidant left, but how they come back? Many people mistake apologies, affection, or promises for real change, only to find themselves trapped in the same painful cycle again. In this video, we'll uncover the behaviors that reveal whether someone is truly growing or simply repeating the same destructive patterns. Many of you have heard me say this before. In many situations, avoidant partners do come back after a breakup, and when the relationship ended because of fear, emotional overwhelm, or unresolved attachment wounds, I often believe reconciliation is possible. If someone genuinely recognizes what happened, takes responsibility, and shows real growth, welcoming them back can sometimes lead to a healthier relationship than before. But there's an important distinction that too many people overlook. Not every avoidant deserves another chance. Some actions reveal something much deeper than attachment wounds. They expose character. While avoidant behaviors can improve through self-awareness and healing, a lack of honesty, empathy, or respect cannot simply be explained away by attachment style. At that point, you're no longer dealing with fear of intimacy. You're dealing with someone whose values make a healthy relationship nearly impossible. Learning to separate trauma-driven avoidance from selfish behavior is one of the most important lessons you can learn. Someone who feels genuine remorse, accepts accountability, and actively works to change deserves to be evaluated differently from someone who repeatedly hurts others while hiding behind psychological labels. Attachment theory can explain behavior, but it should never be used to excuse repeated disrespect. The first major warning sign appears during no contact. If an avoidant immediately begins dating other people or actively searches for new romantic partners during your separation, you should think very carefully before allowing them back into your life. Whether it was casual dating, a kiss, emotional involvement, or a serious physical relationship, the details matter less than the pattern itself. You'll hear people argue that everyone has the right to move on after a breakup. That's true. Every situation is different, and ultimately the decision is yours. But before giving someone another opportunity months or even years later, ask yourself one honest question. Can you genuinely accept everything that happened during that period without carrying resentment? If your answer isn't a confident yes, forcing yourself to forgive won't create a healthy relationship. The unresolved pain will continue resurfacing, eventually damaging the connection from within. This isn't simply about jealousy. It's about what their choices reveal. When someone quickly replaces emotional intimacy with new romantic attention, it often suggests they were more interested in avoiding uncomfortable emotions than understanding them. Instead of reflecting on what happened, processing the loss, or confronting the fears that contributed to the breakup, they distract themselves with someone new. That pattern rarely produces lasting growth. Someone who truly recognizes the value of a meaningful relationship usually spends time reflecting before seeking another connection. They face the loneliness, examine their own behavior, and begin addressing the emotional patterns that created distance in the first place. By contrast, someone who immediately jumps into dating often avoids the very healing they desperately need. It can also suggest they view relationships as interchangeable rather than unique. Instead of appreciating the bond they lost, they search for another person to fill the emotional space. That mindset makes genuine commitment much harder because the focus shifts toward finding replacements instead of becoming a healthier partner. There's another difficult truth to consider. Pursuing other romantic interests during an already painful separation can also show a lack of sensitivity toward the person they left behind. Someone who genuinely cares usually understands that their choices affect another person's healing. They don't intentionally create additional emotional wounds while someone is already grieving the relationship. Of course, people are free to make their own decisions after a breakup, but those decisions also reveal priorities, emotional maturity, and personal values. Pay attention to what those choices communicate rather than only listening to later apologies. The second warning sign is equally important. If they return but dismiss your feelings instead of acknowledging them, take that seriously. Someone who responds to your pain by saying you're overreacting, too emotional, too sensitive, or making a big deal out of nothing is showing you something far more concerning than avoidant attachment. They're showing a lack of empathy. Healthy relationships require emotional accountability. A mature person understands that even if they never intended to hurt someone, the pain they caused still deserves compassion and respect. They don't argue with your experience. They listen. They apologize sincerely. They try to understand how their behavior affected you. Someone who constantly minimizes your emotions is protecting their own comfort instead of caring for yours. Over time, this creates a relationship where your thoughts, feelings, and emotional needs become increasingly invisible. Rather than accepting responsibility, they shift attention onto your reaction, making you question whether your hurt is even valid. That pattern slowly destroys emotional safety. Real healing only happens when both people are willing to face uncomfortable truths with honesty. If someone cannot acknowledge the impact of their actions without blaming your emotional response, they haven't developed the empathy required to build a secure and lasting relationship. Remember, Raul Effect has always been about understanding psychology without sacrificing your self-respect. Compassion is valuable, forgiveness is powerful, but neither should come at the cost of ignoring behaviors that consistently undermine your emotional well-being. Many avoidant people protect their self-image by framing themselves as the calm, reasonable one, while portraying you as overly emotional. This allows them to avoid the discomfort of taking real responsibility for the hurt they caused. When they come back and immediately downplay your pain, they're teaching you that your emotions will only be accepted if they meet their standards. Over time, this can leave you doubting your own feelings and constantly looking to them for permission to decide whether your reactions are valid. That kind of emotional invalidation slowly damages your confidence and your trust in yourself. If someone shows little concern for the pain their actions created, there's little reason to believe they'll suddenly become compassionate the next time you're hurting. They're showing you exactly how future emotional needs will likely be handled, with dismissal, excuses, or blame instead of understanding. Patterns like this rarely disappear on their own. They usually become stronger because the person learns they can escape responsibility simply by minimizing your experience. A healthy partner doesn't have to agree with every feeling you have to respect it. They understand that emotions deserve to be acknowledged before solutions are discussed. An avoidant who refuses to recognize your emotional reality is sending the message that your inner world isn't important. And without that respect, true emotional intimacy can't exist. Saying they're just being logical or trying to help you see things clearly isn't an excuse for dismissing your feelings. Healthy conversations begin with empathy, not invalidation. Someone who is more focused on proving they're right than making you feel understood isn't building a secure relationship. Another major warning sign is when an avoidant returns with affectionate words, but refuses to honestly address what happened in the past. Real accountability is never vague. It requires openly recognizing the specific choices they made, understanding the damage those choices caused, and explaining what they're doing differently so those patterns don't repeat. Without that, promises are only words. True accountability sounds detailed. It sounds like someone admitting exactly what they did, acknowledging how it affected you, accepting responsibility without excuses, and showing genuine understanding of why it caused so much pain. Generic statements such as, "I'm sorry if I hurt you," or "I know I made mistakes," often avoid the real issue. Those kinds of apologies create the appearance of responsibility while allowing them to avoid facing the full impact of their behavior. Real change also requires personal growth. They should be able to explain what they've learned about themselves, what unhealthy patterns they've identified, whether they've sought therapy or done meaningful self-reflection, and what concrete steps they're taking to become a healthier partner. Without evidence of that inner work, their return is usually driven by loneliness, comfort, or convenience rather than genuine transformation. Ignoring the past doesn't erase it. An avoidant who wants to reconnect without discussing the harm they've caused is asking you to pretend those experiences never happened. That teaches them they can disappear, return later with charm, and never face the consequences of their actions. Healthy reconciliation doesn't happen that way. Trust has to be rebuilt through consistent actions, accountability, and a willingness to repair the emotional damage that was done. Words alone cannot restore safety. Be cautious when someone insists on focusing on the future while refusing to process the past. That approach often serves their comfort more than your healing. Strong relationships are built by working through unresolved pain, not by pretending it never existed. Another serious red flag is when they constantly cast themselves as the victim in every conflict. Someone who always sees themselves as the injured party rarely develops the self-awareness needed for a healthy relationship because they never fully accept their own role in creating problems. An avoidant with a victim mindset can turn almost any conversation into one about how unfair life has been to them. If you mention their emotional distance, they talk about how overwhelmed they felt. If you question their inconsistency, they explain how misunderstood they are. If you bring up commitment issues, they immediately point to how previous relationships hurt them. Instead of examining their own behavior, they redirect attention toward their suffering. As long as every discussion becomes a story about how they've been wronged, real accountability and lasting growth remain out of reach. A constant victim mindset becomes one of the strongest shields an avoidant can hide behind. As long as they believe they're always the one being hurt, they never have to honestly examine how their own actions contributed to the problems in the relationship. Seeing themselves as the victim allows them to avoid self-reflection, dodge accountability, and convince themselves that everyone else is responsible. Instead of accepting their part, they protect their image by believing they are always the misunderstood one. This behavior also becomes a way to control compassionate people. They know that someone with empathy naturally wants to comfort a person who appears to be suffering. By presenting themselves as wounded, they often avoid facing the consequences of their choices while drawing sympathy instead. Over time, this creates an unhealthy emotional bond built on guilt and manipulation rather than trust, honesty, and emotional security. Someone who constantly views themselves as unfairly treated rarely develops the accountability required for a healthy relationship. They become so focused on proving they were wronged that they lose the ability to recognize how their behavior affects others. Their priority becomes protecting their own image instead of creating genuine emotional connection. You'll often notice another pattern. They usually have endless stories about how former partners, relatives, friends, or coworkers disappointed, betrayed, or mistreated them. Yet somehow, they almost never acknowledge the role they played in any of those situations. When every story ends with someone else being the problem, it's worth asking who the one consistent person is in all those conflicts. This mindset becomes especially dangerous when they come back after a breakup. Instead of returning with humility and taking responsibility, they behave as though they're doing you a favor. They present themselves as the generous one who has decided to forgive your flaws, when in reality, they're the person who should be rebuilding trust through consistent actions. That reversal allows them to avoid the discomfort of earning their place back in your life. Another behavior that should never be overlooked is humiliation. If an avoidant intentionally embarrassed, degraded, or attacked your dignity, whether privately or in front of other people, that isn't simply an attachment issue. It reflects a deeper lack of respect and empathy that no healthy relationship can survive. There's a major difference between an argument fueled by emotion and deliberately trying to make someone feel small. Humiliation is intentional. It's using your insecurities, vulnerabilities, or weaknesses to inflict the deepest emotional pain possible. Someone willing to attack your self-worth isn't simply struggling with intimacy, they're showing a level of emotional cruelty that goes far beyond avoidance. When someone humiliates you in public by mocking you in front of family, friends, or coworkers, they're choosing to damage not only your confidence, but also your reputation. They turn other people into witnesses of your pain for their own emotional satisfaction. That kind of behavior reveals an alarming lack of compassion. Private humiliation can be just as damaging. Criticizing your appearance, intelligence, personal struggles, or intimate experiences means they're using the trust you gave them as a weapon against you. The very vulnerabilities you shared in confidence become tools to hurt you. Once trust has been used that way, genuine emotional safety becomes almost impossible to rebuild. Pay close attention to how someone behaves during the breakup itself. When they believe the relationship is over and they no longer need to impress you, their true character often becomes visible. If cruelty, insults, or humiliation replace respect, you're seeing who they really are beneath the version they showed while trying to keep the relationship. The damage caused by humiliation doesn't disappear quickly. It can leave lasting scars on your confidence, your ability to trust, and even your future relationships. Someone who knowingly causes that kind of harm shouldn't be given another opportunity to repeat it. Saying they were angry or that they didn't mean it doesn't erase what happened. Emotionally healthy people don't cope with conflict by intentionally destroying another person's sense of worth. That willingness to cause deep psychological pain reflects a serious absence of empathy that rarely changes through promises alone. In the end, these 5 behaviors go far beyond attachment style. They point to manipulation, emotional cruelty, selfishness, and a refusal to accept responsibility. While insecure attachment patterns can improve through genuine self-awareness and consistent effort, these character traits create relationships that become emotionally unsafe regardless of attachment healing. Anyone who repeatedly displays these behaviors hasn't simply made mistakes. They've shown you the kind of partner they're choosing to be. Giving endless second chances teaches them that harmful actions carry no real consequences. Instead, choose someone who treats you with kindness, respect, accountability, and empathy, even when life becomes difficult. Never lower your standards or abandon your self-respect for someone who has already shown they cannot protect your emotional well-being. Attachment style should never be used as an excuse for repeated disrespect, manipulation, or emotional harm. Real change is shown through accountability, consistent actions, and genuine empathy, not empty promises. If this video gave you a new perspective, leave a like, subscribe to Raul Effect, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your self-respect is worth protecting, and the right relationship will never require you to sacrifice it.